Hello everyone, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing my top 10 favorite Victorian novels. For a long time I've wanted to do this kind of video, but I don't know, I just felt like I wasn't quite sure that I'd read enough that I would consider favorites, and then last year I think I thought about doing this and just decided not to. So I think it's finally time I do this video, which is my top 10 favorite Victorian novels. And I would say this is my top 10 Victorian literature in general, because I would have included plays or poetry or other things that stood out to me, but really I'm just a novel girly and I do enjoy those other types of literature, but they don't tend to be favorites. Maybe someday I'll read one that I'm like, yes, this is it. In all honesty, I haven't actually really read any Victorian plays, so that's just an area I need to work on anyway. But I have actually 12 books to go through because I have a couple of honorable mentions, so let's just jump into this, starting with those honorable mentions. I guess you could say this is my top 12 because I have 12 books here, but these two are ones that I wanted to keep it a top 10, and these two really fought to possibly be in my top 10, but I decided for various reasons not to include them. So the first one is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I really love this book. I actually read it earlier this year. It's definitely one of my favorite books I've read this year. This follows a few individuals who are involved in various ways in the French Revolution. That's all I'm really going to say because I feel like that's enough to get you through this. It's not a very long Victorian novel, so I feel like if I say much more it will give some spoilers. But I love Dickens's writing in this. I really enjoy a couple of the characters, not all of them. A lot of them are pretty flat, but I feel like the purpose of this book is to focus on exploring the French Revolution and not so much on exploring the characters themselves, and then also some themes of sacrifice and love and things like that. And so I don't mind that the characters are flat. When I first read it, I like my process, I wasn't as into that, but I ended up just really loving this book, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. And then I have Agnes by Anne Brontë, which is very funny to have this because in the past this has been considered my favorite Brontë novel, but as I've grown older and reread things and stuff, I've realized it's not quite my favorite. In fact, there's two others that I think I do prefer over this one after rereading them, but I still really love this book. I really feel connected to Agnes Grey as a character, and it's just charming and sweet and fun, and definitely has the best, like, healthiest romance in a Brontë novel, which is always appreciated. So yes, I do really enjoy this book. All right, let's get into the top 10, starting at number 10 with North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have to say, a lot of people love Elizabeth Gaskell on BookTube, and I can appreciate why. Her writing's wonderful and stuff, but I just have never really felt that much attachment to her. But two of her books I definitely really consider some of my favorites, and this one is my favorite by Elizabeth Gaskell, North and South. I really love the characters in this. Elizabeth Gaskell's writing is always great, and I actually really loved the discussion of the criminal justice system that's actually present in this book, which you wouldn't really expect based on the synopsis most people give, which is a southern England girl moving to the north with her family for various reasons and seeing a lot of the issues with the social class system between factory workers and the factory owners. And so there's discussion of that, which I find interesting, but there's also something that comes up partway through the book that involves the criminal justice system, and I think it was really interesting how that was dealt with in here. And yeah, I just remember really enjoying myself while I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and I really loved that experience. So then we have the great George Eliot, and my favorite by her is Adam Bede, which I have read Middlemarch, and I would say if I had a top 20 or 25, it would probably be in that list. But really, of the George Eliot novels that I've read, this one is my favorite. I just really love Adam as a character. I really love Dinah, who is one of the main characters. I just really love a lot about the story, and I feel like it has tropes that are very much up my alley. I love the way George Eliot writes characters, and so I feel like the characters in this really stand out to me. Middlemarch I feel like I really enjoyed, but it just didn't stand out to me as much. I just like a little bit more drama. Not that Middlemarch doesn't have that, but there's just not the same kind of drama as what's in Adam Bede. If you've read them, you probably know what I'm talking about, and I just am a sucker for that. So I think Adam Bede's my favorite by her, but I have really liked everything I've read by her. I've read this, Middlemarch, and Silas Marner, and I really love all of them. I think I gave all of them 5 stars, so really great on all of those, but Adam Bede's definitely my favorite. Number 8, I have here The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. Now, in all honesty, I listened to the audiobook of this this several years ago, and there's a lot I know I've forgotten about this story, but I just remember really loving it, and the things that I remember about it are all things I love. Like, I know at the time I had no issues with it at all, and like I said, the things I do remember I have so much affection for that I know I really, really love this book, and I need to reread it so I can remind myself of all the details. I mean, it's a long book, and there's a lot of characters, and so there's only certain characters I really remember much about and about their stories, but I remember loving this and being like, I'm so excited to read more Trollope, as this was the first one I read by him, and yeah, I just really, really loved this. Lady Carberry and what happens to her in the end with someone else, that's my favorite thing ever, and I think Lord Melmotte is just a very, very interesting character. I don't know if he has a title of Lord actually, but Melmotte I really find very interesting, and yeah, there's just a lot of great things in this book, and more than I remember, like I said, but I know I really, really love this book. Number 7, we have The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Brontë. Yes, for a long time I said I preferred Agnes Grey over this one, but on reread last year I kind of realized that actually maybe I do prefer Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I think I might have even done my ranking video for them last year, and I put Agnes Grey above this, but on reflection I'm like, actually I think I did enjoy this better. It does have a more complete plot than Agnes Grey. Agnes Grey is very simplistic and sweet, and I love that about it. But for my personal taste, I love the conversations in this. I love Helen Graham as a character. I think she is a very interesting person to follow, and it's interesting to get in her head as she's experiencing some really troubling, realistic issues in her life. And yeah, I just really, really love this story a lot. So yes, this is my number 7 favorite Victorian novel, and I have officially decided I do like it just slightly better than Agnes Grey. Number 6, we have The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy. I really, really love this book by Thomas Hardy. I actually, a couple years ago, I did a thematic ramble about this book, and I really want to go through all of Hardy's novels and do a thematic ramble for each of them, because I just think the way he explores ideas and stuff is so interesting to me. He does it in such an atmospheric and character-driven way, and that's so me. That's why I love him so much. And this particular book deals with a lot of his common themes, things like how education can change things in the mind of a person and their experience of their circumstances. It's got the love shapes, which I love, of course. It's got a really interesting character who's such a sidelined character and yet has so much influence on the plot and is just constantly like haunting the edges of the story, and yet is such a good person and doesn't deserve that treatment. I just really, really love this book, and I need to reread it because I've only actually ever read this once. It was one of the last Hardy novels that I ever read, and I loved it. Love it so much. Number 5 is one that has just grown on me more and more with time until I just realized, you know what? I love this book a lot, and that's why it's my 5th favorite Victorian novel, one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Vanity Fair by William Thackeray. I love this book. This book is a satire following 2 women who are complete opposites, one being Becky Sharp, who is very manipulative and very wicked, especially for what was considered wicked in a woman at the time, but also some other things that would be considered wicked even today. And then we have Amelia, I can't even remember her last name, but Amelia, who is very angelic and beautiful and wonderful and kind, and we see a lot of their interactions together and also just their different lives that they end up leading. And I love it. I love it a lot. I know a lot of people find the characters very flat because of that. I personally actually don't mind that in the way it's done in this book, because I feel like they just feel very interesting to read about, even if they are pretty flat. And what makes them interesting is the majority of the time they are flat, but then there's little moments that show a little bit more depth into them, and they're like such small little things that I think a lot of people would probably brush them aside. But when you really think about them, you're like, wait, that was actually that was a moment where Becky Sharp actually had a little bit of empathy for someone else or sympathy for someone else. Or, oh wait, that's a moment where Amelia maybe wasn't the kindest she could have been, maybe was a little bit more selfish than she should have been. And I don't know, I just really, really like it. So yes, this is one of my favorite Victorian novels of all time, specifically number 5 on my list. In the 4th spot, we have Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I love this. It's so funny. I have have one other Dickens novel on this list, and then I already mentioned A Tale of Two Cities in my honorable mentions, and all of them I've read in the last 2 years, and I just fell in love, year and a half even, and I just fell in love with these books, whereas before the couple of Dickens novels I had read just didn't really wow me. They were just fine, or I even didn't super like them very much. But these three just really conquered my heart, and so I would consider Dickens an author that I do really like overall. But yes, Bleak House I really love. I love the characters in this book. I love Esther as a main character. I know a lot of people find her boring because she's very quiet and kind of off to the side. I never have issues with those kinds of characters because I feel like I relate to them the most, so I like reading about them, and I love her strong moral integrity, and she's just fascinating. And then I love Lady Dedlock. I feel like she's such a fascinating character, and her husband as well. Lord and Lady Dedlock are just both very interesting to follow. Yeah, I just really loved a lot of this book. I read it last year for Victober and read it throughout the month and just never got bored. Like, I was just so content to come back to this almost every day, and I just really love it. So then right away we have in the third spot David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. So here's my final Dickens on this list. I honestly, depending on the moment, could say different things. I guess, like, depending on what I'm looking at as far as books go, I could have a different favorite Dickens novel, but I think overall I love the characters in David Copperfield the most out of all of the characters in the other books that I've mentioned. I love David's story. I love a lot of what happens in the story. I love seeing him grow up and learn and become a man, and I really love this book. I love, like I said, I love the characters in this. Like, I think Betsy Trotwood and Mr. Dick and some of those other characters that David meets along the way are just so wonderful to read about, and I really enjoy doing so, and I really would love to reread this again because I just felt so much joy reading David Copperfield, and I'm so glad that I finally read this. This was the first book that I read by Dickens that I ended up deciding I was completely in love with, and I'm so glad I decided to continue giving him more and more chances because this was definitely a win for me. Just two left. First of all, we have one that I have considered my favorite book for a very long time, but over the years as I've reread things and read things for the first time, I've kind of realized that there's one that does knock it out of the park, and then maybe a few others. If we're talking about books in general, there's maybe a few others I would put above this book now, but I still it still holds a special place in my heart. I absolutely adore it, but it's just really sad. But that is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This was one of the first Victorian novels I ever read, and I really found myself loving it. It deals with a topic that really is fascinating to me, and so I loved getting sort of an introduction into that topic, and I really love the characters in this. I love Hardy's atmosphere that he creates and building of suspension, and I think Tess is a very interesting heroine, and I really appreciate her. And yeah, I think this is definitely Hardy's masterpiece. I know a lot of people like Jude the Obscure, and while I recognize the talent of his writing in that book, it's definitely not my personal taste and definitely is not my favorite. But Tess, I feel like, is amazing and is one that I will come back to many more times in the future. And number one on my list is one that I don't think I would have ever, well, it might have been in the top 10, but I don't know if I would have put this as a favorite. I don't know. I've had a weird journey with this, which I've discussed in other videos and won't discuss here, but I think I've just officially decided it is my favorite Victorian novel and one of my favorite books of all time, and it really did not start off that way, but it is Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. My journey with this was pretty wild, I have to say, my first time reading it. Like I said, my journey reading this and coming to love it has been a little bit all over the place, but suffice it to say, the first time I read it, I really did not like it. I was in the camp of people who really actually hated this book. But over time and rereads, I have grown to just absolutely love it, and it is now my favorite Victorian novel of all time. I feel a little bit basic saying that. I feel like a lot of people either say Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre as their favorite Victorian novel. Excuse me, but I really do love this. I love the drama, and it's so over the top, and the characters are just dramatic, and Emily's writing style is so poetic and beautiful, and she creates such amazing atmosphere, and I just really love the strange, wacky things that happen in this book. I love Hareton. I think he's a great character, fascinating, and just I love him so much. I think the Cathys are interesting. I think Edgar Linton and Isabel and Heathcliff and all of their shenanigans together and Hindley are all just very interesting to watch. These terrible, abusive, manipulative relationships build. I just think it's fascinating. And I just absolutely have come to adore this book. So, like I said, in the past, I would never say this is my favorite. I probably would have put Tess or maybe a Dickens novel in that place, but like I said, the longer I've thought about this book and heard people talk about it and read it a few times, I've just come to really love it. So there is the winner for my top Victorian novel, at least as of right now. I feel like, you know, as you age and read more books and stuff, things change. And on rereads, things can change. But for right now, that is my list of top 10/top 12 favorite Victorian novels. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite Victorian novels are, if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them, if you disagree with any of the ones I love, if you really hate any of them, let me know why. I would love to hear, I mean, respectfully, obviously, but let me know. I would love to hear, and I hope you are having a wonderful Victober. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!